Hello. Welcome to another video. I hope you guys are all well. I'm doing well as well. So the videos will now be in a podcast format. Um, I really liked the aesthetic of the rooms I had before, but I'm in a transitional phase in my life where I'll be moving to somewhere different. I don't like the aesthetics thus far of where I currently am. And for me, aesthetics are everything. So I just was not gonna do it. I'm sorry. I tried the car thing. It still wasn't like enough. Like no shade to other people that are able to do that. But I needed more. I need flowers, I need lighting, I need the whole works. So we're gonna try this podcast format and hopefully it saves on time and also gives you guys like something to visually track through the videos. I know you guys are gonna miss my outfits. But I'll be back soon. Let's just give it some time. Okay, so on today's video, we'll be talking about the dark night of the soul. Okay, so this has kind of been a buzz term that has been floating around. A lot of people have been not necessarily claiming, but it's been a phenomena that most of us have been seeing ourselves go through. I'm sure people that are on the self-help channels or on the spiritual side of YouTube have bumped into many videos of people describing this dark night of the soul. So today we're just going to look deeper into what it is exactly, the different ways it can manifest, and the necessity of darkness when it comes to personal growth and transformation. So when we talk about the dark night of the soul, it's a period, right, in somebody's life that can be described as depressive, normally after something that is life challenging, that forces one to transform, which forces you to change, which forces you to confront the illusions you had surrounding your reality and break them down. So that is the dark night of the soul. It is a gruesome process. It is not fun. Okay, it is not fun. And the thing about the dark night of the soul, when I think about it, there are two planets that really stand out in describing this process. The one would be Pluto, and the one would be Saturn. Pluto, in the sense of Pluto rules the subconscious. The dark night of the soul is a internal, psychological, and spiritual phenomenon, right? The external matches the internal environment of where you are at that point in time. So, what normally seems as outward shifts and outward loss are just the internal manifested outward of the shedding or the renewal of the spirit, of the mind, of the psyche. Okay, so another way to think about this is, for myself personally, whenever I've gone through this process, and I have quite recently, as in last year, I was shifting and I was changing as a person. And it also so happened to be my 12th house perfection year, and my 12th house is in Scorpio, who is also the ruler of Mars and Pluto. But yes, so I was transforming a lot. My mindset, internally, a lot of transformations. And normally, when it comes to transforming and when it comes to bringing you into the deepest parts of your psychology, the deepest part of your subconscious, your psyche, it's loss, it's trauma, right? So I had a lot of losses, a lot of deep losses, things that were beyond my control. And the losses externally of not only relationships, jobs, ideas of yourself, so-called hard truths and realizations, were simply mirroring, the internal transformations I was making. So letting go of limiting beliefs, letting go of bad behaviors, patterns that were keeping me stuck, traumas that were keeping me in a loop of hurt. So that is essentially the dark night of the soul. It might seem like an external loss, whereas it could be your friends rejecting you, feeling rejected overall, that triggers you to sit back. And the thing about it, just like the dark parts of the waters, is that you need to flow through it. And that's where that plutonic energy comes through, is that Pluto is slow moving. It is the most outer, not necessarily planet, but celestial body in the solar system of ours. So it is slow moving, but the impact is powerful. The dark night of the soul is like something that has been years in the making. It has been thoughts and traumas and ideas that are so deep rooted in your subconscious that slowly but surely make their way to the forefront of your consciousness. And once it arrives there, I mean, it wreaks havoc. Like, it is so powerful, it is so impactful, and all you can do is sit and go through it. You can't fight it. It's like karma, you know. You just can't escape this process. Whatever is hidden and repressed in your mind will eventually come to the surface. So when people talk about the dark night, right? It is you taking that hero's journey. In a lot of mythologies, you see a common theme of a hero that is sent out into the world to complete tasks that are almost impossible to accomplish. And when he comes back, he's ready or fit for whatever position that's needed, or he comes back renewed and better equipped for the harshness of life or for the new role he has to be. It's not necessarily about what tasks he does, but it's the process of maturing, and it's the process of refinement of the spirit of the soul. Which brings me to the second planet that influences this being Saturn. Saturn ruling that darkness as well, that maturity, that harsh lessons of life. My sister has a Capricorn moon. I have an Aquarius moon, right? Both ruled by Saturn, but both expressed extremely differently. When it comes to materialism or social status, she learns a lot of harsh truths and the reality of things very, very early on. Saturn is about reality checks, and it's about maturity. Maturation is a process we can't escape. And as much as it hurts, because maturing is never a fun process, right? But it is necessary. And those that try to escape that cycle of growth end up inhibiting themselves even further. They end up crippling themselves. So it's not a fun process. And Saturn is also described as the black sun. So there's a book I was reading called The Black Sun. And I've been trying to figure out, what is the black sun? What is the black sun? What is this cult of the black sun? I didn't know that that meant Saturn, right? I'm still trying to figure out the correlation between those two. Even within this video, this is just a combination of my own personal life experiences, my own personal esoteric knowledge, and just the counsel of people that I trust around me, and whatever my intuition, however, so my intuition brings these thoughts together. But essentially, Saturn is about maturation, and it's also about mastery. And although maturing might seem intimidating, that's how you become the master of things as well. So that descent into darkness is a purification process of the soul. It is necessary in alchemical processes. It is necessary for us as humans. The cycle of life and death isn't linear. You don't just die once with your physical body. Internally, we're continuously being reborn and dying, reborn and dying. These are continuous cycles that happen within us. Slowly, as we reach higher states of consciousness, slowly as we pick ourselves from our lower levels of thinking, when we release the shackles that have been placed on us, either by our societies, by our internal and external environments. But as we push forward for better, as we refine our spirits, our soul, as we elevate ourselves, these are processes that are necessary to go through, right? So that's why I think about those two planets, is because whenever people have these two planets, they just focus on the intensity or on the hardships. But they're so powerful and they're so necessary when it comes to mastery, when it comes to escaping the so-called matrix, when it comes to elevating. You need the hardship. You need to mature. At some point, you need to grow up. At some point, you need to face your trauma and you need to heal from them. You can't keep running away from responsibilities. You can't keep running away from what hurts you, because that's that Pisces energy, essentially. That's when you want to live in the realm of imagination to soothe yourself. Okay, but that isn't facing your problems head on. That's not how you're going to rise above. At some point, you need to find out how you're going to rise above. So you need to go through these processes of life. Because even in my younger years, I'm saying it as if I'm as if I'm old. I'm still young, but I used to think that spirituality was this process where at some point you're going to reach this level of enlightenment and life is just going to be perfect. And that's not how it works. Life has its ups and downs. Things come in cycles. You become renewed. You become reborn. Different aspects of your psyche, different parts of your characters develop. Certain things get dismantled. This year, you could be learning to stand up for yourself. Next year, you could be learning to become more vulnerable. Next year, it's cycles that keep on coming and going. There are different themes of life. So the process of life and death, it's a continuous thing until eventually your physical body meets its end. So when we talk about the dark nights of the soul, right? It's personal transformation. It's a very personal, a very intimate time in your life, a very intimate phenomenon. It's not the same for everyone else. Yes, the stages and how things play in your life and the themes might be similar. Even astrologically, we could have the same planets in a birth chart, but it doesn't mean that those things will be expressed equally. So your sense of self and perception of reality dissolve. Who you think you are, who you thought you are, gets stripped away. And the illusions and all your preconceived ideas of what this reality are get shaken up, get broken out, complete tower moments. So something anew can come from this. And what this process has taught, even for myself, is the necessity of things to fall apart, on how something better has to be built on a better foundation. Something has to be built from something anew. And, you know, it is the most painful way, but it is the most powerful way, is to just break it all down to the core. You know, scratching the surface is just that, scratching the surface. You need to get deep. You need to go to the core of things. You need to hit the roots of where these ideas of yourself come from, where your belief systems are tied to, why you cling so tightly onto this and not to that. So it is an extremely transformative process of your life. But again, it is not pretty. And on the darker side of it, some never reach outside of the darkness, because we do go into the darkness, but some go to the darker of the darkness, right? And it's not a problem. I mean, all of these are defense mechanisms of the psyche, which I'll talk about in another video. But sometimes your ego loves you so much that it would stop you from hoping for the best, then see you get hurt again. I hope you guys understand what I said. But sometimes yourself, your ego, not as in your ego, like however people describe it. I really don't even want to go into like that as well. But the inner you loves you so much that it doesn't want to see you hurt again. So it would rather keep you hopeless than hopeful and traumatized again. And that is the darker than dark. But yes. So the dark night of the soul is the dismantling of the ego, right? That ego death, and purification of the soul. So normally when this is about to happen, there's this illumination that you experience. So illumination is when you get a true sense of what reality is, right? But you don't grasp it fully. Like you get a sense, but it hasn't come into full fruition yet. So you can see the reality. You can kind of have an idea that, oh no, what I thought was this way isn't. What I felt wasn't. This cocoon that I've created around myself that I thought was keeping me safe is actually my prison. Things start to shake up in a way that it makes you question your own core beliefs. I remember when I was trying to get into school and I had a year of having to study at home. I genuinely just sat on the couch and I just remember thinking to myself, like, what is the point of this life? I'm just a speck in this entire universe. My life is so short. Humans live until 80 and then it's it. It was just I don't know how else to express it. It was depressing. And it's not depressing isn't even a word I can use to describe it. It was nothingness. There was no point of hoping for anything. And I did come out through it, and there's still a lot of shakiness surrounding that time. All I know is that I got through it. And once I started going more into spirituality, the esoteric and all of this, was when I was better able to track these themes in my life. So when I felt that again last year, I was able to put a name to this experience and be able to track it better. So then I knew what is it that I'm going through. So essentially, 4-year relationship down the drain, right? I've always had a fear of failure. I've always had a fear of poverty. Those were my two driving forces, right? Fear. So I overachieved in school, sleepless nights, put everything above my own health as long as I could submit that paper. And then my mental health was in the gutter, and my sense of self was falling apart because I wasn't achieving the marks that I was used to achieving. And keep in mind that I was in a bursary, so I had to achieve in order to keep my spot, you know. It was my livelihood. Doing well in school, being able to afford certain things, having money is it's where I put my self-worth. Being able to say that I'm an intellectual, being able to say that I'm intelligent, being able to say that I'm successful is where I put my sense of self-worth. So what this death did was it took what I identified myself with away and left me with the nothingness of myself. And I had to give meaning to that. When all of what you identify with is stripped away, who are you? What is that? What is this being? This blob of energy left behind? What is that? Do you love that? So that's why I say it's not a pretty process, because internally I was having those thoughts of who am I? What am I chasing? That validation from relationships, now that it's no longer there and I'm forced to validate myself. What am I validating? When the marks aren't there to validate that I'm smart, where am I getting the guts to still love myself from? When all that made me feel good about myself are gone, where is it? I couldn't pinpoint it. I couldn't identify it. It's scary. It's a scary process to be in. So the illusions I had, the desires that I had, all of that just got smashed to pieces. And I was confronted with what I feared so much, the fear of failure, and I failed. Then what? The fear of poverty was just that, a lie I told myself to say that if I don't do this, I'm gonna become a beggar, genuinely. So I had to confront those things I suppressed so deep down to say that I'm no longer pursuing school. I used to always love school, but I did it because I loved it. But now it became a means of survival. I did it out of desperation. I did it out of fear. Fear became my driving force. And it's something that I had to be confronted with. The worst case scenario. So there's a phrase: there can be no rebirth without a dark night of the soul, a total annihilation of all that you believed in and thought that you were. So when it comes to creation, creation starts in darkness. Creation comes from the absence of all that is. You need the dark to find the light. You need to go through that descent into Hades. Okay, you need to descend to come out refined, to come out better, matured with more knowledge. That generally is such an underrated part of your life. And I think most people shy away from it because we naturally try to avoid what makes us feel uncomfortable. Because the thing about a dark night of the soul is once it strips everything away, you're just sitting with yourself. You're forced to sit with yourself. As ugly and bare as you are, there's nothing but you to look at. And a lot of people are scared of the silence. A lot of people are scared of the lack of material comfort surrounding them. Because then you're forced to look at self and be honest. And in order to be honest, you have to be vulnerable. And a lot of people are scared of what that means because they feel like their ego can't take it. And that's why the dark night of the soul is necessary. You can't get that type of vulnerability with your defenses up. Your ego needs to be dismantled so you can get the truth as ugly and as terrible as it is and swallow it and accept it and come out even better than what you were before. So that ego needs to be dissolved. Some people use drugs, some people use shrooms. You can have a good trip, a bad trip, but the point is your ego is dissolved. You realize that you're one with everything, that you're not better than anyone, and that this is life, you know. A lot of insecurity, and I don't know what video I watched it from, but he said that people that are seriously insecure are actually the most egotistical because you assume people care. You assume that people are really shining a light on all of your mistakes. And for most of us, that really isn't the case. I know I don't care enough about. It's not that I'm that selfish, but I'm not walking around with a flashlight on people. I'm always looking at inside. And if I am looking at people, it generally is out of admiration or what not to do. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the symptoms or the feelings that can be brought about, right? So it can be feelings of abandonment, dark thoughts. You know, you might not love what you used to love anymore. You might just have grim, negative thoughts about the future, about reality, about where you are. The feeling of being rejected. You don't know where your place is anymore. This concept of society doesn't make sense anymore because you don't feel like you fit in anywhere. You don't know where to place where you're feeling your place in this huge, meaningless life. Painful realizations. You know, maybe things could have been different, but the truth is they're not and they won't be. And that is one of the hard parts, is learning to let go. Because essentially, after you go through this purification process, you let go of what you once were, who you once were, and you step out anew. And trust me, that is the most relieving part of it all, is coming to the realizations and surrendering to the process and coming out anew and feeling powerless, which is my personal one. So my ascendant is conjunct to my Pluto. So I've always seen the undercurrents of power dynamics, the need for power, essentially in my entire life. And once I got to university, and let's say higher entities would do things that would mess up my education, I realized how powerless I was in the situation. I saw the power dynamics between us. And that forced me to surrender because I used to work myself to death or put myself in the most compromising situations because I thought that everything was in my control and that I had the power to do anything and everything and change anything and everything. And humility and accepting that, you know what, this is bigger than me was one of the hardest lessons I've ever had to learn, and something that I'm still trying to process in this transitional phase in my life where I'm moving on to something that feels like a better and more fitted opportunity. There's this uncomfortable point of silence that I'm in where nothing's really moving, you know. I'm not necessarily in a phase of waiting, but there's nothing I can do immediately. Things are set, dates are done, things are short, but there's this moment of having to sit with myself, you know. And within this process, I had to realize that I have a problem with surrendering and letting go and accepting that there are things that are bigger than me. There are entities that are bigger than me. And it is so ridiculous of me to try and take on the role of God in my life and say, all of this is in my control. Because in reality, it isn't. And it's so relieving. The guilt I felt for things that I genuinely couldn't do anything about was immense. You know, the pressure on myself I put to achieve certain things that honestly nobody was even looking at me to do, but I still felt this need because there was a lacking within myself. And I had to go through the darkest of feelings and the darkest of nights and completely dissociating from this reality that I had before to form a new sense of self-worth that didn't come from a lacking within myself. So there are 6 stages. There's the dissolution, right? Where everything you thought is a lie. Boom, 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 it hurts. Fear, because your sense of stability is gone. What you identified with no longer exists. It's imagine telling somebody that has always believed that Mr. Right is gonna come, sweep me away, and save me from poverty, and they get hit with the harsh reality that no one's coming to save you. You're scared, out of your mind, right? Then misery. You're miserable. I don't even need to explain that further. Disgust. You no longer enjoy what used to bring you happiness. Those simple pleasures that used to feel like enough don't feel like enough anymore. Then truth. You have this insatiable thirst for truth. You're now ready. Your defenses have been shattered so low that you have nothing but the truth. And you have this deep set feeling that the truth will set you free. And that it shall, trust me. And then re-observation. You're constantly re-observing and analyzing to death, basically. Where you are, what things are, how you feel. You gain new perspectives that lead to this enlightenment, this easiness. Because it is so crazy to think that just a simple change of perspective could end your suffering, generally. And then I struggle to pronounce this word, but equanimity, right? The indifference that comes after all of these processes. It's generally relief. For me, the indifference is the relief. It's like after you've cried and you've cried and you've cried, that relief, that indifference you feel afterwards because you don't feel anything. And within that indifference shouldn't be underestimated. Because even within the indifference, you have come to terms with where you are and what things are. You're no longer resisting the change, you know. The darkness has come and you surrendered to it and you learned the lessons that were necessary to learn. And you've moved past it. And the you that has now emerged from these dark waters is stronger, more capable, and just deserves trophies, accolades, deserves everything in life. Generally speaking, I would even say throw yourself a party. Because often when people overcome hardships, they rarely ever celebrate themselves for doing that. You just want to celebrate when you get something right, but you need to celebrate when you've pushed past, because that is the true testings of life. That is where your maturity comes from. That's where your realization of self, your self-awareness comes from, you know, where even things like constant victimhood just doesn't exist anymore. Oh, this happened, this happened. No, you've moved past it. You've seen the lesson. You've gained experience. You can now use those limiting beliefs or those fears of failure, those fears of this and that, you know, rejection, as fuel to achieve what you want in this life and for self-improvement and self-empowerment. And as I've said, as below, so above, as within, so without. The new that is within will match the new that is without. Sometimes you need a change of scenery to match the new person you are inside. So either that's a change of friends, a change of career, a change in appearance. But if you sow the right seeds inward, you will see the fruits of it outward. So yes, the dark night of the soul, not easy. It's not something you can self-induce. It has been years in the making. You just didn't know that your subconscious was slowly pushing it to the front, because at some point you need to confront it. And you are capable of overcoming it. There are no tools in your arsenal to speed up the process. It's horrible, but you have to go through it. But just like within alchemy, that purification, that transformation, it's a skip. A step you can't skip. It's something that just needs to happen. And it's ugly, it hurts, but we can't demonize this powerful and transformative phase in your life. I was speaking to my mother and she said, at some point, I said something to her that was the catalyst of her letting go and starting anew and gaining more after. Going through financial situations and being like, okay, and now I need to let go of the Mercedes. I can't keep up with that anymore. I can't keep the Mini Cooper. I used to drive a Mini Cooper, now the Cooper's gone. I was staying in this whatever $1 million home or rand home. We can't stay in it anymore, you know. But I will say we are in a shift. Like the silver spoon that I had compared to what I have now, it's not the same. But I can tell you, my work ethic, my resilience, my strength could only have come from these things being stripped. I don't know if she would have seen how capable she was if she didn't have to be forced to let go of that and start anew and prove not only to the universe, but most importantly to herself that she can do it. That gives you a self-confidence on another level. Once you've proven to yourself that you can get there. So, yes, that is the end of today's episode. Hopefully, tomorrow we'll be discussing something a bit lighter. But you know what? We can't avoid these topics. It is something that we all go through. I'm just showing you that there is a light on the other side of the tunnel. But this process, don't be afraid of it. Don't run from it. You just need to surrender. The realizations and the gems you get from this are priceless. And it really is something that you'll never forget, but you will mature, you will become resilient, you will get your strength, and you will get your flowers. But you need to also give yourself your flowers. So if you're somebody that has gone through this, please, with that next little monies you get yourself something, congratulate yourself, write yourself a poem, get yourself a bottle of champagne, take yourself to a river, buy yourself flowers. I don't know what it would take to make you feel appreciated, but you need to appreciate yourself because you took the hero's journey and you came out triumphant.